what we started, I say. Yeah, wrapped up in bazaar. Okay, so the Nakuda is that the Maamre is explaining how the Eibishter's Blikvulness and Blikvul, when you chazed the Maamre, there's a part. When I taught it, but when you learn it, it will be confusing. Namely, the end of Veis Dalet, the term Ein Sof. The term Ein Sof is used here in two ways. Ein Sof Amitius and Ein Sof Stam. And Ein Sof Stam means Yeshle Tchila, and that goes on the Eir. Right? That's the answer of the shah that he brings in the Tlacharim and from Menachem Azariah Mipano. Why call the Eibishter Ein Sof, call him Ein Litchila? And the answer, because that goes on the Eir. The Eir is true, which is a hard, is Ein Sof, is Ein Sof, but it has a Tchila. But then Ein Sof Amiti is Ein Litchila. The same words. And it's a little bit not so clear in the Maamre, but I don't see any other way to learn Pshat, and if somebody else has another way to learn. But that seems to be throughout the entire Maamre, especially at critical Eis Dalet. And the Nakuda is that Oir Mein Amoy as opposed to Shefa, which is not Mein Amoy. Shefa is Hashpa, which is a Mahus Dover, but as we did the various Mashalim, but it's not Mein Amoy. In Hashpa, you do not get away from Golui, the whole Mashpia. After 40 years, and even then, it's Koi Inish Adaita, it's on the Das of the Mashpia. It's only that Prat of his Seichel. Not the whole Mashpia, but in totality, even after 40 years. But in contrast to Oir, which is Megal and Moir, completely, you see something. The entire entity is in a state of unadulterated, uncompromised expression. So the chiddush of the whole Maamre is, or based on the Maamre that the Tikkun Zohar is, that even though naturally we would expect that because Oir has a tchila as a beginning, it's an emanation of the Moir, and it's only a ha'ara. As I explained, what a ha'ara means is when what's Oir again. Oir is when you look at something, what's in your head? It's the Oir shebedover. You don't have the thing itself, as opposed to Hashpah. It literally light bounces off the object and enters into your head, and you see it. The image you have, whenever you're looking at anything, it's Oir. What you're, unless you grasp it. But if you're just viewing something, that's what you're seeing is Oir. You're seeing Oir emanate and a faithful rendition, unless again there's something disturbing. But if all things are, there's no hell in Behester, and the air is clear, not what I'm looking for. There's no whatever. You understand what I'm saying? The air is clear. There's not a pollution, not a obstruction. Then you'll see accurately and faithfully what there is. So the Oir is completely Megala the Moir. And therefore, here's the paradox here. Even though Oir mitzad atzmai telosham the Maamre, Oir itself, it's only a ha'ara. But since it's mein hamoir, it reflects the truth of the moir and expresses the truth of the moir, and therefore it is not said explicitly in the Maamre, but there seems to be the whole point. Therefore, even though Oir mitzad atzmai is only Ein Sof in the narrow sense, but Ein Litchila, it is Megala the Ein Litchila. So much so that we learned earlier is the Oir Megala the Ein Litchila, or that he's a Kadman, which means nothing precedes him. So much so that through the Eibishter's revelation, he creates an entity that also feels that Ein Litchila. That's us, Leilam Hazan, Nivroim, which is impossible Such a sense, such an experience would be impossible. It was fundamentally not true. How do we feel completely independent? It is not true. There's no part of us that is independent. An entire being is being ischadish yesh ma'ayim. How do we feel independent? That hergish should be impossible. It's only possible because oir meina moir, and the moir taka is independent. I am that I am. And therefore we have that sense, I am that I am. That's all to illustrate how oir meina moir, and it carries it carries in Hashem's expression, his creative expression, that which he creates, not just him. The oir is meina moir is about him. What the oir creates is his creation. The chiddush is that the signature, his signature, is present in every one of his emanations. That goes without saying, but even in his creations. Via and gashmi imarab masech magadlu masech. The bleak fullness of creation. As we're talking, when it comes to in other words, l'mayla lifnei tzimtzum, even atzilus. So there, this is Elam ha'achdos. This is not a creation. This is God revealing himself. So there, what's carried, what's expressed there is the ein le'tchila, the ein le'sof. In the words of the Maimon, amitis in abligo. Here in Elam Hazeh, it's also true. It's also true. The ein le'tchila is also carried here in a more dramatic way, when we really feel that we're absolutely independent, in a corrupted way, in a profoundly corrupted way. This truth of the moed, of the etzer, that is a kadman, ein le'tchila, is present here as well. In addition to, he's going to point out, the ein softness of creation. What I'm saying is that the factors, what's being dealt here, this is the issue at hand here, is the true amitis inyan habligvo, which like the moed is ein le'tchila, and that God reveals that truth about himself in his revelation. Even though revelation by definition has a starting point, but the revelation reveals the truth of his being. We're talking about it because how do we even speak of this? Because he's revealed that, has chosen to reveal that. The oir reveals the truth of his true amitis ein sof, that ein le'tchila, and therefore we have such language and can talk about it. And that is expressed, that signature, as it were, is present in all of his creation, which starts at Biyah. Atzilus isn't the creation. That's why it's called Atzilus. It's an emanation. Bria, or implies creation, something from nothing. The language of the Maimon gets much more difficult in the next ice. I'll tell you what I think Pshat is. Try to find if someone wrote a beard on it. Nobody's done it yet. So we'll see. Stand to be corrected. Trying the best. We'll see what happens. But now in Ois Hey, as we'll see, people will please suggest what they think. So now he's explaining. So that was till now he spoke. Lifnei tzimtzum atzilus. Now actual creation. Marab masech magodlu masech. I think we should start again, like say, to get the flow. Mamshir b'maimer, shmibchines samachus datzilus. Samachus datzilus is the actual creative force, God's word that creates. Now we're talking about creation yesh ma'ayim. Endless creation, endless creation, endless creation. How manifold are your works? How great are your works? We're talking the great numbers. That's in quantity. In Kalmus and in Eichus. Explanation. Explanation level 1, then the next place. Even after Hashem's expression, the oil is nimshach matzilis tabiyah, and it's through another tzimtzum, not like the tzimtzum arisha, but it's a tzimtzum like the shu, this of the shechina that interposes between the person and the world. Simple meaning of the shu. Shem ha-malachim b'chlal, that's malachim in general, are this filter. Ubefrat malachim matat v'sanbel kanal, these are the two primary malachim, Yitzira and Asiya. Matat being the head of all the malachim. Shaideis and Nasa Nivroim Nifrodim. So now we're talking about Nivroim creations and distinct and separate creations. Nonetheless, saying Gdoila Nivroim Shalim Nema Magod Lamasech. They're great, about which the pasuk says, "How great is your works." So there's two things: how manifold and how great. What's Magodlu? Magodlu is a bachla, as is explained later at length, but a bachla sutzvah shemayim. Where do you see greatness as opposed to number? That's in the heavenly hosts. Shebhem mudgesh in agdula. There we see greatness. And vehein also on Yavrim mitzvah. And likewise, the creations on terra firma here on earth, Sheberiba also much on this in tremendous number. And here, it's the emphasis is how many, manifold. In Igam Bozeh, Yeshming, and the Bligvol, the Bezeh, the Ike Chiddush of the Bozeh is in the Marabah Masech, here in this world. Infinite. Not just potential, that they can keep on producing endlessly. That's in potential. But at a given moment, it's not Bligvol. He's going to say that every moment, Mamash is, the pale is Bligvol. Let's see. Elegam Bligvol B'Peil. That's coming now. This is, let's try it. Vinya Bazen, Inyan is, Kvishin Levayad, Marash Baruch, Bemshech Mayim, Rabbi Malapos. The Marash says on the famous Semish Mayim, Rabbi Malapos, Sumor Menechem, raise your eyes heaven, Urumi Mibara Eile, and see who created all of this. Hamaitzi Mispat Tzvon, who brings out in number their hosts, Meirov Oinim, from his great power, in his power, Ish Oin, Va'amitz Koyach, and the strength of his power, Ishle Neder, there's not one entity is missing. He brings them all out into existence. What is this pasuk saying? Is it to raise your eyes and look at this? This is the meditation, the reflection. It's the mandate of each Yid. This is what leads to the recognition of God's absolute oneness and unity, hinted to in the opening words of the pasuk. Because Shema, the objective of raising your eyes heavenward and appreciating the nature of creation is to engender the Sum Barim Enechem. Maram is to what? The Shema Yisrael. The Kavan Baz, the intent of the pasuk of this is godliness of this meditation, of this reflection is we should appreciate God's wonders. The wonders in its absolute perfection. Ad b'chinas antu chad, you are one of the two ways he touched before. But here the diak is b'chushban, manifested in the endless numbers of creation. Now, question moving, it's not understood. How are we supposed to? How do we arrive at God's once looking at creation? You think the opposite. Don't look at creation, look beyond creation and meditate about the creative infinite force that created. Not looking at creation itself. He's saying no. And here in creation, you see his presence, the consequence of his presence. of his true believable presence and active, intimate involvement. So this is the Marash Shaila, and his answers as follows. So through raising one's attention heavenwards, thinking about the heavenly hosts, the stars, the planets, there you can see, as you'll explain soon, how great is your works. He comes to the conclusion per force. It's one integrated universe, one world. Even the hosts, the creations of the world, they don't exist. A particular entity does not exist forever. Ish, meaning the actual entity. The species continues to reproduce. They don't say how great. It's the same sun in the sky, undiminished, as we'll say later. That's the Magodlo. It hasn't weakened. Not true of creatures on earth. But they're only the great in number. Nonetheless, through these bonus in Svar Shamayim, we come to recognize that Gambahem, even, as you said before in the previous that's the Chiddush, that even here on earth, there is the true infinite actual bligvul, not just potentially in that continually reproducing, but b'peil mamash. Now, how so? Let's see. Then again, the language of the Maimer gets difficult, at least for me, and it starts here. Now let's just translate those words. If it would be the will of the Creator that creation should endure endlessly, now that sounds like that's a theory. If he would, but it's really not that way. It's not so. It is that way. So why is he saying it ilu? I don't know. Why can't this be stated in the affirmative as opposed to if, when it is so? It may be such a big question. That's the way the Maimon speaks. So as I hoist, it's all like, then it would be like as if it's not. As I hoist, I'm shachas, so then the emergence of creation from the audits, from the world, from the earth quite literally. Yes, in the brackets, everything comes from the earth, which because of Eretz Mimeno Yetze, the pasuk says, going to bread, that the earth from which bread, which is the staff of life, emerges, and moreover, pasuk in Keheles, everything comes from the earth. So then we get the flow of this. If he would want, it's the language of the mind, that the will of the Creator would be that creation should be endless, then the emergence of all of creations from the earth, would be drawn in an endless way. Keep on coming. Now, and since that's what happened, that's the funny, like, why ilu? The Rotz Nabayda is such, and that's why. Maybe I'm missing something, but you see what I'm asking. So he concludes, the fact is the earth, the world, keeps on reproducing. As you said before, it's kayim b'min, the species continues endlessly. You have to say, in the physical world that's producing this. There's invested in infinite koyach in creation. It's not just a product of an infinite koyach, but invested in creation is an Ein Sof koyach. Now, Maimon gets even more confusing because look what he says now. The end of the previous ois said it's not just b'koyach but also b'poyel, which is going to conclude with this ois as well. But getting there, he now says, Statement. It's in potential, not b'peil. Why? At any given moment in the history of existence, there's a finite number of creations. So it's b'koyach. You're going to say in the next line, no, it's actually b'peil, which is how this whole thing began, the last words of the previous ois. But before we get to that, now that's what he's going to say right now. So now he just said it's b'koyach, invested in the creative force, in the literally the earth. How it works physically, I don't know, but it's certainly within creation, plant life, all living life, produces life, that produces life, produces life. All came from the earth. Everything sprouted. Man came from the earth. Everything sprouted from the earth. So it's all this koyach invested in the earth itself. So it's not only bekoyach in the sense that it keeps on producing. No. And even though he just said now he says no. And the actual bligvul. What's the raya? If there's bligvul b'koyach, it has to be bligvul b'peil. Let's see why. In the movement, it would appear not understood. How is there even the potential bligvul koyach in creation? That which is boundless, how could that be in part factored into finite creation? Even b'koyach. Something which is bligvul, that which is infinite cannot be contained as something finite. So how does a finite world, as I'm talking to you, I'm starting to see the answer to this question. Perhaps. But the question now is, how does a finite world contain a koyach bligvul? You can't get infinite into finite. You can't get bigger into smaller. You certainly can't get bligvul into finite. Now, if creation is fundamentally a finite entity, what's the creation gashmi? It could not be invested in the ability to keep on producing endlessly. Never mind the prayer. Even the potential to produce this could not be contained by a fundamentally finite entity. Now, the fact that it is therefore saying that the world be'etzem, its starting point is its bligvul. Since invested in creation is this power of endless reproduction, so this cannot just be a potential, but it also must be a b'peil. Now, wait a second. First, we have the klal that only the maila in koyach b'peil. Maybe the potential is here and it doesn't manifest. Wait, did you say no? The reason is when the koyach is its own world. The koyach is its own world. There's no hechrech in Elam Hazeh in our world that any potential actualizes. Just because you can't do something means you're going to do it. You have the ability, but if you don't act on it, it's not going to happen. Because they're two separate worlds: the world of action and the world of your potential. They're two separate worlds, and lav dafka, one will lead to the other. But here he's saying, it's not true of the way the creation works. Here the creation is invested b'peil mamash in the physical creation, because, let's talk this out, fundamentally, objectively, logically, rationally, it's impossible to have an infinite power in Elam Hazeh. The fact that you have an infinite power in Elam Hazeh, this is already a kind of b'peil. This is already a b'peil, and therefore just continues that way. That's not a b'koyach in some other world. It's invested in Elam Hazeh. because you can't get, to begin with, you can't have an infinite koyach in a finite place. If an infinite koyach is in a finite place, that's already an actualization of the infinite. And therefore, he's saying the conclusion is that the koyach habligvul in Elam Hazeh is not just look what it produces, it's actually present. The fact that you can have even an infinite potential in Elam Hazeh. Let's go a bit further and see if what I'm saying is what the Maimon is saying. If the actual creative force in creation was a koyach gvuli, was limited, the infinite property, okay, he's going to demonstrate this with the Rai, we'll leave this to tomorrow. And the bligvul part isn't potential, then creation, as he goes on to say, it could not be that every second, he's talking about every second creation should be as strong and as powerful as it was the second before. It would be a gradual weakening. Okay, friends. Things are up in the air. We'll continue Be'ez Hashem tomorrow. Be'ez Hashem, what I'm going to do is learn it through and then give a summary before we even learn the ice inside and then learn inside the ice. And you're all invited to learn it yourselves and share your thoughts.